In this episode, we talk about Rajasthan's tribal custom posing a challenge in the centre's housing scheme. We also talk about the dismantling of Maha Kumbh mela. But first, we talk about US President Donald Trump's statement about Indian tariffs. Hi, I'm Ichha Sharma, and you're listening to Three Things, the Indian Express news show. Last week on Friday, President Trump once again went on a tirade about what he claimed were the massive tariffs India had been levying on the United States, adding that India had now agreed to lower them. Now, these comments may have raised concerns in New Delhi, especially since Prime Minister Narendra Modi had visited the US just last month to meet with the president.
India charges us massive tariffs, massive. You can't even sell anything into India. It's almost restrictive. It is restrictive. We do very little business inside. They've agreed, by the way, they want to cut their tariffs way down now because somebody's finally exposing them for what they've done.
Now, while New Delhi did not immediately respond to Trump's statement, Commerce Minister Piyush Goyal met with his counterparts in the US. And according to the Ministry of External Affairs, the two governments were actively advancing discussions on a multi-sector bilateral trade pact. In this segment, my colleague Niharika Nanda is joined by the Indian Express's diplomatic affairs editor Shubhajit Roy to discuss the ties between the two nations, Trump's remarks, and the upcoming bilateral trade agreement in the works.
Shubhajit, talking about the statement that was made by US President Donald Trump, can you tell us about Indian tariffs and the trade that has been happening between the two countries over the years?
Well, India has traditionally been a high tariff country. That's a fact. But India-US trade has really grown in the last, 2.5 decades. And the numbers are almost close to $200 billion annually. So obviously, it can become much better. And the Prime Minister and the US President, when they recently met in Washington, D.C., they decided to upgrade it. Essentially set a target of $500 billion from the current levels of $200 billion. So that's an ambitious target because the potential is much higher. And from that standpoint, yes, much can be done in terms of trade if the tariffs and tariff barriers as well as market access for Indians is addressed.
Right. So even though India did not have an immediate reaction, how has India responded to this statement?
Well, India has not offered any immediate response, but, the MEA spokesperson recently sort of said that, the Commerce Minister Piyush Goyal was in the US and met his counterparts, and the two governments were in the process of advancing discussions on a multi-sector bilateral trade pact, essentially covering all the issues. So this bilateral trade agreement, they are saying that, when Prime Minister Modi met US President Donald Trump at the White House on 13th of Feb, at that point in time, they both agreed to negotiate the first tranche of a mutually beneficial multi-sector bilateral trade agreement by fall this year, which is essentially in the next 7 to 8 months, essentially by September, October of this year. And so India has sort of been ready to negotiate now, and it had showed its seriousness and urgency to the Trump administration, saying that it would send the lead negotiators once the US side had its trade representative in place. US administration had its trade representative in place only by 26th of Feb. And after that, India's Commerce Minister Piyush Goyal and a delegation of officials were sent to hold talks. The US Trade Representative Jamieson Greer and US Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick, and the teams from March 3rd to March 6th. In fact, the Indian Commerce Minister and the delegation were among the first interlocutors to meet both Greer and Lutnick to broadly discuss the contours of the negotiations.
Right. And what is the focus of these negotiations?
Now, in that sense, they're working towards 2-3 aspects. First is obviously to increase market access. Second is to reduce tariff and non-tariff barriers. And third is to deepen supply chain integration. So the negotiations from both sides see progressing in the right direction as they both have a common understanding of the proposed deal.
Shubhajit, you mentioned that India and the US are working on a bilateral trade agreement that is supposed to be finalized sometime by the end of this year. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, there was a deal that was in the works, but it could not be concluded at that point of time. This time they've again restarted the negotiations. As I said, it's sort of to deepen India-US two-way trade across goods and services sector, increase market access, reduce tariff and non-tariff barriers, and deepen supply chain integration between the two countries. Now, given the broad scale of the deal outlined by both sides, the negotiations are now expected to be long and tortuous. That would mean several rounds of discussions between the negotiators at both the technical and political levels. And these are issues which will be part of the negotiations in the next 7 to 8 months. And that's why India and both countries have their interests and sensitivities on what products, what sectors to be taken up. And these are very legitimate matters for a discussion, as we were told by the Indian negotiators. So now we have to see what are the products, what are the sectors, what are the concerns of both sides, and they have to come to a compromise and a mutually beneficial deal.
So is this going to be a fast process considering that the negotiations have already begun?
Well, not really, because the concerns, sensitivities from the both sides are pretty deep. And it will be, as I said, it will be long and tortuous. And, India is negotiating bilateral trade agreements with European Union and UK, and they have also gone on for some time. But India has also concluded agreements with countries like Australia, UAE, Switzerland, Norway. And in those agreements, India has reduced its average applied tariff significantly. So there has to be a sort of a compromise, a give and take, where India lowers its tariff barriers in some cases, but it also will keep a threshold at some point in some of these products and categories and sectors and services.
And Shubhajit, what is India's main objective regarding this trade deal?
India wants a mutually beneficial deal that works for itself, its market, its trade, its domestic producers and suppliers, as well as it gives it access to the US market more and more. And it also wants a indigenization program, which is the Make in India program, that foreign companies can manufacture and should manufacture in India as well, and not just buy or sell from each other. So that, I think, broadly sums up India's basic priority when it comes to trade deal negotiations.
And Shubhajit, another thing that President Trump had talked about were reciprocal tariffs. So can you tell us what they are and what is India's stand on them?
President Trump has sort of said that because India's tariffs are high for US products, US would also put tariffs on Indian products as a reciprocal basis. So, which would make Indian goods more expensive for US market, and therefore it is said that it will discourage importers from the US to import Indian products, and that would hamper India's exports to the US. Now, how will that play out? We'll have to see. As of now, India's expectation is that because India is in negotiations for a trade deal, those reciprocal tariffs, which are expected to be right now to be kicked in from 2nd of April, would be delayed till the negotiations take place. So that is the Indian position and Indian hope and expectation right now.
And next, we talk about a tribal custom from Rajasthan. A centuries-old tribal tradition in the state is now posing an unusual challenge for the Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana, the central government's affordable housing scheme. The custom in question, known as Nata Pratha, is widely accepted within the region's tribal communities.
In this Nata Pratha, there is a divorce taken by the couple in front of the local panchayat of their tribe. And for that, they do not register it in the court, as is normally done by non-tribal people.
This is the Indian Express's Parul Kulshrestha, who reports on Rajasthan for the newspaper.
So, if a woman doesn't want to live with her husband or a husband doesn't want to live with his wife, they can take a divorce, and a woman wants, she can go and get married to some other guy. And that is called Nata Pratha. Usually, tribal region, it is called ki wife Nata chali gayi. कि मतलब वाइफ ने इसको छोड़ दिया and she has done nata with some other man. So this decision of leaving her husband does not have any kind of document or a divorce decree.
This means that while the practice is very common in the region, it has no legal recognition. And so, as a result, it is preventing people from accessing the government's housing scheme.
So whenever a husband applies for PM Awas Yojana, he is always asked the question that where is your wife? And if he says that my wife has divorced me, is asked to present a court decree or a document that your wife has divorced you. Because on papers, his wife's name is always present. So now how to prove that his wife has divorced him? There is no such proof in every document, Aadhaar and all. The wife's name is still present. And in that case, the husband, because the wife is already living with some other men and she's married as per the tribal custom, husband is now in the dilemma, and even the officials of that region are in dilemma how to proceed further. And there are thousands of houses in these tribal regions that are stuck due to this provision, that there's a tribal divorce which is not registered, due to which the houses cannot be sanctioned under the PM Awas Yojana.
And Parul, can you also tell us in what way the scheme aims to provide housing benefits and also the extent to which it is beneficial?
Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana is actually a scheme started by the central government to provide financial assistance to families that come under a particular salary group with financial assistance through which they can build their permanent house in the rural areas. So they are usually provided 1.3 lakh rupees, which is the amount which is given to them in 3 installments, which is directly transferred to the bank accounts. There are other areas like hilly regions and, some Sahariya tribes who need more assistance because of the region and the areas that they are living in. In that areas, the amount is even greater. In Sahariya tribes, officials told me that they get around 2 lakh rupees to build a pakka house. And to get eligible, to get benefit from the scheme, it is required not to have any more than 5 acres of land. He should not be having a certain amount of income. And there are a lot of criteria that is provided by the central government. If you fulfill those criteria, then you will get the financial assistance.
Right. And of all of these eligibility criteria, what role do marital records play?
Central government all over the country is promoting women, and the amount that is given under the PM Awas Yojana is usually given in the name of the wife. In her account, the money is transferred, or the money is transferred in the joint name of both husband and wife. But wife has to be there.
Now, Parul, considering that people in this region are facing problems and are unable to access the scheme because of Nata Pratha, how are local government officials and also the scheme administrators responding to these challenges?
I talked to a lot of block development officers, village development officers, and BDOs are the direct link who are supposed to implement this PM Awas Yojana, and he has been given a target that you have to fulfill, and this is the target, and these kind of homes are sanctioned and they have to be completed in this time period. Now in tribal regions, when the wife is not present and they don't have a court decree, the houses get stalled. And number of times, BDOs of the tribal regions of Rajasthan, there are 7 districts, have told the state government and the officials in the state government that this is a problem over there and we are not able to complete the houses. The similar problems have been presented to the Union Ministry as well of Rural Development, that this is a unique problem in the tribal regions and there has to be some special provisions regarding that. Until then, the houses cannot be completed. Now, the thing is, because this problem is not very much highlighted, and the person sitting in Jaipur office will not be able to understand what is going in the tribal regions in a village in Rajasthan. So that's why the pressure is built on the block development officers to anyhow complete the project and complete the house as per the requirement and of the PM Awas Yojana, because they have to complete the target. So now somehow they have found a way. So what they do is, when the wife does Nata, there are a lot of cases when that the wife has left her husband, but the first installment is directly sent in her bank account. Now the husband is complaining that me and my wife are divorced. So how are the officials supposed to handle the situation? They contact the local panchayats who have a significant influence in the region and in front of whom the divorce had happened. They contact the panchayat. The panchayat will then summon the woman and they will try to cajole the woman that, give him back the money, and whatever amount of money that will further be transferred in your bank account, you have to give him everything. And that's how they were able to complete the houses. There are like thousands of houses that ironically were completed because of the interference of the panchayat leaders. And the block development officers and government officials have to take a lot of meetings with them to be able to get the money from the women and transfer it in the husband's account name.
Right, and during your research, you also spoke to a few applicants of the scheme. What did they have to say about the situation?
There are a lot of applicants that I talked to who were suffering from this, but there was this one woman whose son had died and the daughter-in-law had done nata. She had left behind three of her children who are now taken care of by the grandmother. Now the first installment, even after doing nata, is sent to the wife's account. So then the grandmother have to approach the officials in Sarpanch and they were able to block the second installment. But now, as it is, she did not receive the first installment and then the house is not completed. If she asked the officials to add her name, which is not possible because she's the mother and the wife is already not present because she did nata. There's another man I talked to was Pema Amina. His wife has already left 1.5 years back and now she has done nata with some other man. Now the money is stuck because in every official document, her ex-wife's name is still present. And he is running pillar to post to get the money. But the officials tell him that you have to somehow manage or convince your ex-wife to give you the money after this transfer to her account because they do not have an official decree on which they can remove the wife's name. So that is how like a lot of people are facing problems and all. And because of, the tribal region and, a kind of very neglected areas of the society. And even the central government and the state government also do not take those areas very seriously. And while, drafting the problems and the situation of PM Awas Yojana, they did not take into consideration of the customs that are being followed in the tribal regions. Due to which and due to the neglect of the central government and the state government, these areas, people are still suffering and a lot of houses are stalled.
And Parul, have similar issues been reported in the tribal regions before this?
Yeah, so I traveled to a lot of villages in that region, Salumbar and Dungarpur areas. So you will find one or two cases in every village. You will find at least one or two cases. Now, the problem in those areas is that the tribals are very, kind of a very secretive community. They do not allow the outsiders to interfere or, get to know about the problems that is going on in their village. So it is very difficult to, take them on record and what is going on. But as per what is told by the local representatives, Sarpanch and all, and Panchayat region and all, a lot of locals, these kind of problems are found in every village, almost every village in the tribal regions. And like I mentioned earlier, due to the interference of the government officials and somehow they were able to catch all the women to give him the money. That is how they are able to complete the houses. Otherwise, it is a really big difficulty and it is a rampant problem in the tribal regions.
And also, has there been any proposed policy changes to accommodate such tribal practices?
No, there has never been any initiative by the state government and central government. Because the thing is, these problems are very neglected. I even contacted the Union Ministry and their officials, and they told me that they are not even aware of such problems. Even though in a lot of meetings, state government officials told me that they have raised these concerns with the central government. But the thing is, the tribal issues and customs are not taken very seriously. I mean, as in a simple word that I can say, that is the reason the officials do not focus on the policy changes as per the customs of tribal regions. And majority of the tribals are not very educated. So going to the court and hiring a lawyer and giving him the fees, neither they have financial power, neither they have education level to that extent that they can approach the court. So it has even become difficult for them to get benefit in the PM Awas Yojana, and it is not possible for a normal tribal person in Rajasthan to approach the court. So that's why these customs are stuck, and because of the a neglectful nature of the central government and who are not considering the customary practices in the tribal region, they are facing problems.
And in the end, we talk about dismantling the Maha Kumbh Mela. The Maha Kumbh 2025 may have ended, but for the government authorities and cleanup crews, the real challenge has just begun. The massive temporary city set on the banks of the Ganga in Prayagraj must now be dismantled, cleaned, and restored to its original state. But with tight deadlines, third-party verifications, and an extensive inventory process, the task is proving to be more complex than anticipated.
See, the entire Kumbh area, which was declared as a district in itself, is spread over about 4,000 hectares of land. This is alongside river Yamuna and Ganga.
That's the Indian Express's Maulshree Seth, who wrote about this challenge for the paper.
This is almost about across a 14 kilometer of embankment across these two rivers. And the deadline which has been set so far is March 20th, that the officials are planning to dismantle everything by that time.
And Maulshree, what are the major steps involved in dismantling this temporary city? And maybe you could also highlight which authorities are responsible for overseeing this process?
See, as I said, it was declared as an entire district for 3 months' time. So there was all the amenities. If we talk about just about 2 lakh of temporary tents that had come in, there were roads that were laid, then there were toilet facilities that were created, and even the temporary electricity supply chain. So it was the entire city in itself. And now, since because it's on the embankment of the river, so it has to be like brought down to ground zero now, because as per the rules there cannot be any permanent structures left on the riverside, because once the rainfall starts in, so this entire area would be covered with the river water, so it has to be cleared back to ground zero. So earlier also they waited, because it everything started, the setting up of the city started somewhere in October after the water had receded and the embankment was a bit clear. So now, once this entire dismantling is over, so again the river water would come over the surface. So one after another, they have to undertake this, and dismantling process involves first the verification part of it, because there are a lot of payments to be made. So first the verification has to be done whether thing was there on the spot or not. So it all started first with the verification. There was a third party arrangement which was made and the verification was done. And as soon as the verification was done, then the dismantling started alongside the creation of inventory. Because most of these inventories lie with the different department. If we talk about this, the urban development department, or if we talk about the electric poles, irrigation, because there were temporary bridges, then the roads were laid with the checkered plates, so that public works department comes in. So different departments, they have their own stock rooms. So after the inventory is created, these are sent to those storage areas. And some of it is kept at Prayagraj only, because every year there's a Magh Mela which takes place on the banks of the river. So it's not at this scale like Kumbh or Maha Kumbh. But for Magh Mela also, for example, while I was talking to some of the officers, they said that this time we are expecting that we'll bridge, because about 8 pontoon bridges would be required for the Magh Mela. Also, all the stuff we would be kept for that. And while compared to Maha Kumbh, if we talk about the Maha Kumbh, there were about 31 pontoon bridges that were developed to cross the river from one side to another.
Right, and you also mentioned that there is an added pressure for the authorities about the water quality as well, right? So can you tell us what steps are being taken in that regard?
See, even in the past, while the Kumbh was ongoing and even before the starting of the Kumbh, NGT had raised concern over the river water quality. So now the bigger task would also be to ensure that once the entire city is dismantled and it is being brought back to ground zero, so the water quality is at that level and there's no structure or nothing is left on the ground when the river water actually covers this area. And since it was already declared as a no discharge, no defecation area, the authorities would have to ensure that they undergo all the formalities. And since there were toilets which were built up, the pipelines which were laid, they have to ensure that things are brought back to ground zero before NGT has its, their experts have their clearance for the area.
And also, Maulshree, what would you say are the key logistical challenges being faced in dismantling the Maha Kumbh city?
See, the numbers itself has been a challenge. When the Kumbh was there, establishing of the city, then the crowd management, when there were lakhs and not just lakhs, crores of people were coming into that city each day. And now the bigger part is dismantling of everything. Just to put it in numbers, there were, for example, 2 lakh tents were there, and there were about 1.45 lakh toilets that were established, and there were over 600 kilometer of road that were laid in between the city, and about 200 kilometer of pipeline that was laid, the drinking water supply and all. So the numbers in itself is very huge, but they have to do the dismantling, they have to do the inventory part of it, then sending it to the places, to the respective godowns across the city. It's a very cumbersome process that each and every department would have to, it would take. As I spoke to some of the officials, they were saying that we are trying our best to do it as soon as possible, but it's likely to take some more time.
You were listening to 3 Things by the Indian Express. Today's show was edited and mixed by Suresh Pawar and produced by Niharika, Nanda and me, Ichha Sharma. If you like the show, do subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. You can also recommend it to someone you think may like it, with a friend or in your family. This is the best way for people to get to know about us. You can also tweet us at Express Audio or write to us at podcast@indianexpress.com.